of conservatism?
I think conservatism is about small government, and I think the future of our movement is about standing for small, limited government. I think that we need elected officials who generally believe in small government, but we also have to embrace the 80% rule, that if you're 80% with us, you're on our side.
All right, thank you very much. Why don't we go through, just starting out with such a broad question, I'd like to hear from the entire panel. Bill.
Yeah, and Lori's in the non-enviable spot of being last, so we'll all say all the stuff, but you can
but her job is creative work, and so I know that it's going to be an outstanding answer.
Well, so I mean, we're going through some pretty major shifts and debates about what does it mean to be a Republican, what does it mean to be a conservative, all those things. To me, as I look at it, I say a couple of things have to happen. One, you have to have personal responsibility, and we also have to have personal liberty. And those things aren't in conflict. They need to come and be unified, actually. And sometimes that's a challenge to hit that balance. But to me, those are two important things.
I mean, Aric. I think the traditional saying is that we're a party of strong national defense, a party of making sure our values are protected in terms of our own social conservatism or social values, and then also in terms of having an effective and efficient government. And that's something where here in Michigan, I think we've really taken the lead on trying to get back to what is the role of government here in our state. I know the Lieutenant Governor's been a good leader in that. When you were in the state legislature, you saw the wrong direction when Governor Granholm, the Granholm Shower administration was there taking us in the wrong direction. But you've heard about the tax reforms and the budget reforms, but something you don't hear about is the 1,000 rules and regulations that we've worked to do away with to expand the sphere of freedom of individuals. And I think that's really what conservatism is about, is making sure we have an effective, efficient government where we're able to allow individuals in the free realm to win and compete and allow that opportunity to happen.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that's been said. The founders, established a government that they wanted to see very limited, that they wanted to see as a citizen government. And conservatism is really, I think, about conserving that ideal, that, we want a limited government, that there's a role for government, but it's limited. And I think accountability is very key, too, that understanding and having an accountability of our elected officials, but our elected officials being accountable for the laws that they pass and
living under them.
And that's what I was going to say, making sure that they have to live under them as well. So, and like Jennifer said, the 80% rule, that if you agree on 80%, then let's kind of row in the same direction and try to accomplish as much as possible.
And can I just expand on that? I actually think the 80% rule plus. I think integrity matters, and I think that I would rather have an elected official that I disagree with, that I believe is being honest with me, than have someone who I think is paying lip service to issues or blowing smoke or saying what I want to hear. And so I think that is an important distinction. I would like to know that I would like my elected officials to be predictable. And I think that's an important part of this discussion.
Do you mind if I jump on that a little bit? I mean, because I think you're hitting a key point to this, and we're talking about generational discussions here in many ways too. You've got a generation of younger people that have seen it all, right? They've seen their parents go through nasty divorces. They've seen everything on television and the internet. They believe nothing, right? I mean, they can be very, very cynical. They can be very jaded at a very early age. And they don't believe oftentimes the things that they're being told because they do know that actions speak louder than words. And I've found so often, I used to sit on the board of a film school in Grand Rapids, and you could just see these kids. It's like life is all make-believe to them in many ways for a younger generation. And the best responses that I have ever gotten from younger people is that when they go, you know what, I totally disagree with your stand on life. But the fact that you actually knew that I disagreed and you still told me what you thought, that's important. I've got a sense of respect for you for that. And I think as we're going in and talking about what is going to attract another generation to conservatism and to the Republican Party and those kinds of things, we have to be honest with them, you know? And I tell them, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm also a social conservative. And we may end up having some disagreements about that, but that should be okay. Let's talk about it rationally and have a good, healthy debate.
So one of the common themes that I heard throughout all of the answers was this idea of liberty, freedom, smaller government, and even feeding into much bigger issues or bigger ideas than any single issue. But it's hard to think of a better example of the notion, a big notion of equal opportunity as opposed to equal outcomes. And of course, Jennifer, you led a movement, or at least you were the catalyst of a movement that culminated both in a Supreme Court landmark Supreme Court decision and also a modification or an amendment to Michigan's Constitution. Mm-hmm. And I want you to, we know that story, and there's a lot of people that are so thankful coming after that on the trail that you blazed, that are so thankful for the work that you did. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about how we use these big ideas and issues to grow this party, to grow the number of people that are engaged in the process itself. And maybe you could hearken back to that example back then.
Well, the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative, it was a constitutional amendment that was a true grassroots movement. There were 5 of us that staffed that campaign, statewide campaign. Every single one of us was under 30 at the time. And we took on the entire establishment. If Right to Work is the example of how the establishment and grassroots came together, the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative is the example of how the grassroots can take a good issue, one that is a winning issue, not only politically, but it's the principled thing to do. And we can take that and we can win despite the establishment. I think it's very important to talk about equal opportunity versus equal outcomes. And I think it's extremely important that we take that message into the inner cities, into places where it's very uncomfortable to have those conversations. Not just during an election year. I think that's key, is that so often Republicans, election year, all right, I'm going to go give my speech to the NAACP. I know I'm going to be uncomfortable, and it appears as pandering. We have to have a long-term strategy on talking with quote underrepresented minorities, and talking to them in the same terms, the same way that we're talking here today. I tend to think that conversation, long-term, moving underrepresented minorities into our camp, I think is a very long-term proposition. But not having that conversation, I think, is detrimental to women. And I see it playing out like this. One of the Republican candidates says something, the left goes after them and says, oh, you're racist. And so that candidate backs up and kind of backs down from our principles, rather than saying, no, I'm not. I believe in equal opportunity. I don't believe in equal outcomes. So they back down from the position. Us, the grassroots, we get upset that they're not standing up for principle. And the flip side of that is the soccer mom at home that is a moderate sees what's happening and says, oh, maybe they do have something to be ashamed of. They won't even stand up for their own principles. And so I think that it is extremely significant that Rand Paul went to Howard, non-election year, went to Howard, gave a great talk, not necessarily because, I don't necessarily think it's significant. I don't think he thought that he was going to win over a lot of people in that audience. But the message that it sends to the soccer mom who's watching the news is, I'm not afraid of what I believe in. And I think that is extremely important.
Lori, I wonder if you could expand then a little bit, since soccer moms was what's touched on, or at least the example used, soccer moms. But it really does highlight an area that maybe we need to focus in on when it comes to the future of this party and the way that we communicate and the strategies that we use in order to communicate these big ideas that are good for everybody. And we look at and we read about in the headlines, war on women, and we know that high unemployment and kids having to move away to find opportunity and things of that nature, that those are the things on soccer moms' minds too. And so what's the problem or the issue getting through to really a generation of young families, but particularly moms?
Well, I think growing our ranks is something that is often a reaction to conservatives and people who want less government really want to be left alone. And so they become involved because something happens. Like there's an issue that motivates them, whether it's Obamacare, the Civil Rights Initiative, needing to overturn, right to work, have right to work, overturn, a union monopoly in the state. So it's, we bring people in because something needs to be changed. Otherwise, most of the activists and people who would be naturally part of our grassroots, they want to go to their kids' soccer games, and they are going to go to their kids' schools, and they want to go to their jobs, and it's not because they lack a social life that they get involved in politics. So it has to be meaningful. On the women's, as far as the women's vote, I think there has to be a greater recognition in our party of that the women's vote is not a coalition. It's not like small business owners or left-handed cyclists, or that women have been the majority of the electorate since 1984. In 1980 was the last presidential election where men were the majority of the voters. So we can't keep treating women like they're a coalition. And actually, in 1980, Carter won the women's vote, but still lost the election because men were the majority of the electorate. And even though women were the majority of the electorate in 84 and 88, we won because our message resonated. And I think that you look at Reagan's tone and his style and the way he spoke about issues, he didn't compromise on issues at all. But his tone was not off-putting to women. And I think what's happened is we've not, it's so much about the way we talk about issues. And I think the challenge, Jen, we were talking backstage, and Jen and I were talking a little bit about sometimes, within our base, you only get applause if you're really acerbic and strident. And so sometimes people feel like they've really accomplished something because they've gotten a lot of applause within our ranks, but you're really getting applause from people who agree with you. And what our goal needs to be is to reach out to people who haven't yet agreed with us, but would naturally be agreeing with us if we could listen to them and talk to them in tones they want to hear. So it's not about changing what we believe, but how we say it and how we reach out. And I think for women, that's key.
Bill?
Yeah, I would say for women that's key, and I would also add in Hispanics, all right? I mean, we are having a lot of debate about immigration and all these other things. It's the fastest growing minority population in the United States. The demographic, if you look at what their core beliefs are, they should be Republicans. Mm-hmm. They should be. And oftentimes it's how we are talking to them, or whether we are talking to them, as Jennifer was pointing out.
Or actually listening to them.
Yes, more importantly than listening to them. And that has got to be That's got to be part of our calculation because we can't just show up in election years. They're getting told something very, very different from the mainstream media, oftentimes within Hispanic media as well. And I know there's two Spanish newspapers, Spanish language newspapers out of Grand Rapids. We have added them into my rotation. I sit down with them 3 or 4 times a year now. And they appreciate it, and we're getting feedback from them as well. Go do a town hall meeting, and you will figure out very quickly that they've got a lot of the same core beliefs that we do, and we've got to capitalize on that. It's about packaging, though.
And it's about opportunity. We are the opportunity party. I mean, I went to a fairly conservative school, Hillsdale College, probably heard of it, but it's one of
Fairly
the...
conservative,
Fairly
yes,
conservative.
yeah. That makes Calvin College, where I went, look, you know, like
Well,
we're
you guys
left-wingers,
continue to
right?
trend
Yeah.
left, but anyway. But I mean, this was, you know, a deep tradition of the second school in the nation, except women and African Americans and others on par with white males. Deep tradition. They don't take any government funding right now either, but it's through equal opportunity. They don't even ask the question whether or not, you know, what's your background nationally. But you look at the party itself, the Republican Party itself, it is the equal opportunity party. There's one African American senator, U.S. senator. That's a Republican. We have several governors who are, you know, again, Susana Martinez from New Mexico. We have Bobby Jindal from Louisiana, Nikki Haley. I mean, but they're not identified in our party as being different factions. These are Americans. And it's how do you work for that, showing that we are the opportunity party. We are the party for the individual is valued instead of the collective. And when you have somebody giving away free stuff, free student loans, or cut in terms of free stuff, that you have less opportunity in the long term, how do you manage that messaging? And that's one of our challenges. And I don't think we've gotten to that point of being able to get there.
Focusing on issues that appeal and rather than divide. I mean, there are going to be issues that are divisive, and we believe what we believe, and we're going to be called on. We have to be honest. Integrity matters, and taking a stand and being principled. But, you know, we can't assume, and I think oftentimes the assumption is that there are women's issues, or there are, you know, Latino issues, or Hispanic issues, or there are, you know, but for most families, the issues are, you know, I want my kids to have a good education so that they can have a job and not live at home past 18 or 22. They can go to college, and then they can raise a family and realize the American dream. I mean, we kind of all want the same thing, and we've got an answer, and we have to speak that message, but speak it in tones and listen, you know. And
we can't compete with the left on identity politics. I think it's fine to know the stats and say that, you know, the only U.S. senator, the only black U.S. senator is a Republican, but I don't think that that's going to win people over. It's connecting with people, and it's understanding what matters to them. I've transitioned. Obviously, I talk about race preferences. That's my core issue. And I've transitioned from talking about it in terms of my story. Most people know a story like mine. The girl down the street or the guy down the street who didn't get into college because the university gives some sort of preference based on race. But people know those stories, and we've won. So on that story, so I've transitioned to telling the stories of the unintended victims. And I think that that's one way that we bring people into, to our side without beating them over the head. The unintended victim of this policy would be, during the 2006 Michigan Civil Rights Initiative, I met a girl, her name was Ashley, and she was 16 when she graduated from college, graduated from high school. She had a 4.2 GPA and a near perfect ACT score. She was accepted to every single college that she applied in, and she was given scholarship money, but she happened to be black. And she said, it's so unfair to me. She said, because the moment that I raise my hand and get a question wrong in class, everyone's going to question my credentials. Telling that story and letting people then come to their own conclusion that, wow, these policies hurt the very people they're intended to help, I think is a great way to bring people over to our side of the aisle on that specific issue. And I think that there are stories like that on every single issue where you don't have to beat people over the head with where you're at. I think there are times to do that. But I think that those stories really, they help bring people in. And again, we can't compete on the identity politics. People see right through that. It's not effective.
You know what occurs to me as I hear this conversation unfold, that we keep on going back to big ideas, right? Big ideas and important values, things that matter, and things that are somewhat universal. And you think about across all these different groups, and if you take away other divisions, you say just people, just Americans, believe these things and are with us on these things. And but the other thing that I noticed is tone, right? So as each of you are describing these things, that the tone at which you're using and describing them is such that it's non-threatening, it's convincing. You're portraying that you really do understand the different sides of these different issues. Let's talk about how important tone is, and I want to direct this first to Bill Huizenga because we served in the legislature in a very dark times for Republicans together, and then Aric, we've served in brighter times in the legislature together.
I can't tell you how jealous I am that you guys have being able to do that.
But during that time, I noticed though that you were one of the Republicans that really seemed to be able to hit the right tone, and in terms of describing things during a time when things weren't going so well for us. And people were pretty mad, or getting pretty mad, and yet the tone was different. Let's just talk about the importance of that and the way we communicate.
Well, it is about how you communicate, right? Because it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, yellow, red, green. You're ticked about $4 gas, right? Right? All right. I mean, you're cranked off about your grocery bill. You're frustrated that your kids are not going to a school that is fulfilling their needs, and it's really easy to either raise money or to get a lot of attention and a lot of applause if you are going to just throw out platters of red meat and red meat and red meat. And there are times for that. And as I say in Washington, there are times in Washington I have to stand up and say no. And there's times in Washington I have to stand up and say hell no. But there are also other times where you have to sit back and say, okay, let me try to understand where you're coming from. I still think you're wrong, but let's work through why you're going to do that. And and I get it, there's people out there that want it to be just shrill, and they want it to be conveying their sense of frustration. I think ultimately there might be times for that, but if that's all you do, and everything's at DEFCON 4, right? There's an old saying, if everything is important, then nothing is important. And we've got to be able to sort through that to figure out, all right, when is the time to get cranked off and to be publicly cranked off, and when's the time to say, okay, let's work through this. Let's figure out how we're going to solve this issue, because we've got some important things we've got to solve.
A lot of the times we put ourselves in a box too.
Yeah.
We call ourselves the most conservative. Well, how many people think that conservative solutions are common sense solutions? I think that, right? So why don't we just say common sense solutions where we're talking to 80% of the people and you're not putting yourself into an ideological box. I mean, again, that's just one example of building up that we talk about balanced budgets and bringing, accountability that we have to live within our means like the family has to. You're talking 80% of the people instead of the 40% that consider themselves conservative.
Right.
Some people, I think Susanna Martinez last year at the Republican convention remembers going to a party, never really got involved in politics before. And then she gets back in the car after, her husband and her were talking to some folks about politics, and she comes back and believe in limited government, more efficient, effective government, individual freedom. Damn, I think we're Republicans.
Yeah, that was a great line.
And this is where talking about issues and policies instead of just trying to, box people in, I guess is a challenge.
I'll give you another example, and he knows about this. He's a good friend of mine, but Alan West, all right? Who here is her? He's a great guy, all right? So Alan and I came in at the same time, and he's a good friend, very conservative, right? Okay. Well, I'm talking to a couple of my conservative friends, and I have this one guy go, "Why can't you be more like Alan West?" And I said, "Let me tell you something. If I look at the Heritage score, the Americans for Prosperity score, and there's one other score, there was a third score that I said, did you know I'm actually more conservative than Alan West?" He goes, "No way." I said, "Look it up. Go and look it up." He had to come back to me and say, "You're right. You actually are." Now, Alan is a great guy and a unique guy, and that's sort of his thing, though, is he's going to go out there, and he does a lot of it, frankly, because he likes it. He likes just tweaking these people, right? And you got to sometimes understand that the people that are most vocal and out on the front aren't always necessarily the ones that are most conservative, and the ones that are tending to be a little quieter and working at it differently aren't necessarily the ones that you think are the sellouts or the whatever else. And I do think it comes down to tone. And it's frustrating to me oftentimes that allies and natural allies and friends of ours in the party, it seems like sometimes it's more about the donate now button at the bottom of the email than it is about actually pushing an agenda or pushing a movement. And we've got to strike that balance. But if we are truly going to make sure that we are a force and continue to be a force in the House of Representatives, at the state level, the national level, in the Senate, at the state level and the national level, winning governorships and winning presidencies, we've got to make sure that we're not just making our own base happy. We are going to have to figure out how we communicate those common sense ideas and solutions to people who go, you know what, I might disagree with them on a couple of things, but I know that they're doing the best that they can with what they've got, and they're looking out for me. I think that's important to people.
I agree that that's important. I think that tone matters, but I also think that being yourself matters. And I think so often candidates and elected officials, they try to emulate someone else. Barack Obama is charismatic. People relate to him. He's relatable. For as much as all of us in this room dislike his policies, I believe that he has been elected and reelected because he's relatable and people like him. But not everyone is Barack Obama. I look at some of the things that Romney did during the campaign, and there were times where I felt like he tried to be someone that he wasn't. There was talk about him being a very funny man, but it came across as staged and like he was trying too hard. And young people especially, since part of this panel is about connecting with young people, they see through that in a heartbeat, and they think, forget it, just tell me who you are, show me who you are. And so, Alan West, his tone is very different from my tone, even though I'm guessing that we agree on most issues. I'm naturally a quiet...
And by the way, Alan knows that and will say that.
Yeah.
And he'll say, I've got a role to play. My role to play is to get Al Sharpton. Well, yeah, that's part of that. And I got another guy, Trent Franks from Arizona. Phenomenal guy. We're in a Bible study together. And Trent will joke about that. He'll say, my job here in Congress is to make sure you all look reasonable. And that so the speaker can go and say, hey, Mr. President, Harry Reid, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to control these guys. Look who we got to deal with. And that's okay. I mean, that's all part of what makes us a good party, though.
I think with the tone matters also just inside the party. Like when we're talking about the grassroots, and we've got, for new people, it matters coming in when you're kind of storming the gates, having been there, and it matters when you've been, now for me, somebody who's been in the party for a long time, having a tone that's very respectful of new people who are coming in and are passionate, and if you truly believe in your principles and the issues that you stand for, then you don't have to scream them at people. And I think, and it's hard to come to that, having come in the party with, I came in back in 88, ran the Robertson campaign, and, nobody wanted us in, and, so we had a rump convention and took, everybody outside, and there was all of these battles and the natural growing pains that you have when you grow, and when a party grows and adds to its ranks, it's painful, and it's painful for the people who are trying to come in, and it's painful for the people who are wanting to accept, more in their ranks without having to change and adjust too much. And all the way around, tone there matters, just listening and talking in a respectful way that, because what I found when I came into the party back in, 88, is after I started, I had a lot of things I wanted to say, and I had a lot of things I believed in, a lot of change that needed to happen, and it needed to happen right now. And when I stopped talking for a little bit and listened, I found out that there were a lot of people who believed exactly like I believed in, and we're so glad that new people were coming into their ranks, and that was 88, and we ended up carrying the state for president, So the newness and the new people, while we weren't accepted readily right away, over time we were, and I think it's because we started to respect each other, and our tone changed in the way we interacted and talked to each other. And while we're going through that, now as a party with a whole new movement of people, people who care about liberty and the Constitution and are frustrated with Obamacare, and we are too. And so I think if we can step back and just in the way we talk to each other and in the way we listen to each other, if our principles and our issues are right, then the issues will prevail. It doesn't always have to be us prevailing. It's what's right, and truth will prevail.
And that'll need to be the last word.
Okay.
And I appreciate you guys being a part of the panel. Lori Wortz, Aric Nesbitt, Bill Huizenga, and Jennifer Gratz. Thank you so much for your insight on this discussion about the future, what conservatism is, and how we get from here to where we need to be. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Guys, thank you for being here.